I stumbled on it in Delhi Crime because I pitched it everywhere and everyone said no at the script stage. And then I stumbled onto these producer financiers who were willing to take a risk. And at that point, I was at the verge of giving up. So at the end of the day, my feeling with streaming has always been and always will be, with series, is that it's not a first weekend thing or a first week thing. They find their way through word of mouth. Sometimes it takes a year or 2 or 3, and that's fine. Delhi Crime took a couple of years. All the biggest international shows we have, it wasn't that it just picked up 1 week. It takes time. And that'll only work if the show is really, really, really well done.
Richie, it is truly wonderful to have you on the streaming show.
Thank you very much.
As I was just telling you, you absolutely were one of my sort of dream guest wish lists, of people to talk to when I started this podcast. And put simply, when Richie Mehta is making a new show, you sit up and pay attention. And I'm so glad we could do this in person.
It's my pleasure to be here. Yeah, much better than Zoom.
Yeah, definitely. We are, of course, here to discuss your new Amazon show, Poacher. And it is my job to cover incredibly exciting storytellers. And I'm so glad that we could be talking about it. I want to start by talking about your journey to Poacher. So you make Delhi Crime. You sort of raise the bar of what a streaming series can be, can achieve in India specifically. And then I know you've said that this is a story that found you when you were working on your project India in a Day. And then after Delhi Crime, you sort of researched this. In the pandemic, you're writing it. I'm curious to know, as a filmmaker and a writer, how was your approach to Poacher different as compared to Delhi Crime in terms of just tackling the beast of a series?
The approach was actually not too dissimilar. As you said, I encountered it when I was doing a documentary prior to Delhi Crime. And then after I finished that documentary and I knew about just that this case existed, this poaching case existed, I had written one scene into the first episode of Delhi Crime, which is Rasika Dugal's character finding tusks on a random traffic stopover. And that was like a note to myself. When you finish this, get to that. Don't forget. So as you're going through the post of that project, I'm always seeing it. I'm like, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. And then I'll tell you the main difference is when I was doing that series, the themes around it were very murky and nebulous. And I was never sure I was the right person to do it as I was doing it. And also, it was my 6th project in Delhi. And I wanted so badly to find another experience of India. Because my experience of India was very much, especially as an NRI, a very urban experience. And so this case I thought was an opportunity for me to see another side of India, which was obviously the side where our lives intersect with wildlife very, very directly. And more importantly, main difference is I would not question the ethics in any capacity of what I was doing. I think this is a very, very simple and straightforward issue to get behind. And it is 8 episodes, so there's a lot of issues presented in it. The main thrust of it, the main spine of what I'm trying to say, it's not murky. And I am very happy to invest all of my time and energy backing this concept and this idea.
There's less of a, delicate balancing act in that.
Yeah, the delicate balancing act is in the intricacies of plot because ethics are straddled all the way through. And that's one of the interesting things about this. In a way dissimilar to the last project, but you have these wildlife crime fighters who are so committed to the cause that they're willing to cross their own ethical line sometimes. And I think that's really fascinating. That makes for obviously great drama and a compelling analysis of what it means to be idealistic.
You also said in an interview, because your storytelling is very socially conscious. You make things about things that affect you, about the world, about humanity. You said that when it comes to issues, you feel like narrative fiction is the way to get to the heart of something as compared to documentary. Why do you think that is?
And obviously there are exceptions to everything I'm going to say, but my feeling is generally documentaries, and I love making them and I've been involved in them, I love watching them, but documentaries, I feel like it's easier to obscure the truth because what you see as a viewer, you just assume is real. And you assume is real because somebody's speaking it. And I think for narrative fiction, audiences are very savvy when they're seeing something that's truthful. Now that doesn't mean a big action film. It also applies to that because you can see the truth of a moment. You can see the truth when a performer is doing something. You can see the sincerity of what's being put across the screen. So that's what I mean by sensing truth rather than being presented or seeing it. And I think if you combine that very new sensory ability of an audience, which is developed over the last 20 years, me being part of it, I suppose, I feel like narrative drama is a way to really get to the heart of certain ideas.
And make people feel like it.
Yeah, make people relate and feel, and also for me, I mean, the movies that have changed my life are narrative dramas. Many of them based on true stories, but dramatized.
Speaking of documentary, I mentioned India in a Day. This was such a distinct. I remember I watched it on the big screen. There was a screening, I think, in 2015 in Mumbai.
Yes, one screening in the country.
It was one of the most distinctive theatrical experiences I've ever had. I'd never experienced something like that. For people who don't know about it, this is your project for Google, where people essentially you ask people across the country to sort of shoot aspects of their lives, send it to you, and you pieced it all together to make a sort of documentary, feature film, which really is like a immensely wonderful snapshot of a nation. I imagine as a filmmaker, that project is a gift that keeps on giving. You must have so many sort of stories and characters all jumbled up in your head.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was thinking about it yesterday because, again, it was a genesis of Poacher, right? I received this footage. One of the pieces of footage I got from that shoot day was of this ivory raid in Delhi, and this was the end of this investigation, which now I present. I mean, those pieces of footage I recreate in episode 8 of Poacher. And that's just one of 100 things. I mean, I keep thinking I could go back to India in a day and just take notes again and make 100 movies out of those ideas. Yeah. And actually, the process of making India in a Day really changed me, because before that, I had made some independent feature films, and I was experimenting with style because I wasn't really sure where my style was as a filmmaker. And then India in a Day came along, and that's also, when we talk about the ability of viewers to discern what's true and not true, the footage I received, I gave explicit instructions to my team, because we had a group of viewers, 15 of us. And I said, look, if something is really technically off, the sound isn't good or the picture quality isn't good, assume it's probably not going to be very good. And we give it a 1 out of 5, and 5 out of 5s are the best. And within a week, even I was watching, we all realized, wait a sec, usually the 1 out of 5s are the best, because it's people who don't know how to use a camera, but they have something so important to say, they're trying, they're fumbling.
And you feel it.
And you feel it.
Yeah.
And then the people who have the really great cameras on top of the Himalayas doing the time lapse, it's beautiful, but that's that.
Yeah.
And it's lovely too, but that's not really the story. And that's when I realized, my God, we are, as a global audience, passing a threshold of our ability to see truth and see through BS, essentially. And I said, well, if this is the threshold now of truth storytelling, then I have to step up my narrative game. And then Delhi Crime was a product of that. I need to really bring my level up so that you are really immersed as a viewer. And we are talking about the making of a project, but my hope is the viewers don't think about the making of the project. They don't look at the long takes. They don't look at whatever technical wizardry went into this thing. They just look at the content.
Yeah. But of course, I have to ask you about the making of these things. I'm so fascinated by how Richie Mehta gets shows made. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, in a normal, traditional world, a writer-creator goes to a platform, sort of pitches a show, they commission it, it gets made. In your case, with both Delhi Crime and Poacher, you go off, you find independent producers, you got it financed, you made the whole thing, and then you approach a platform.
Yes.
Why do you go about it that way?
Because I need time to figure things out. I move very fast in production and post-production, but when I'm developing and writing, I need time to develop things, because once the machinery of filmmaking, which is military-esque, comes into play and the resources required are so grand, you don't have time to second-guess a lot of things, especially the heart of what you're doing. And when I'm writing and researching, I need to find that heart. And so far, this might change in the future, but so far my process has not been conducive to collaboration with the end user at phase 1, with the end distributor. With Poacher, I took, again, a few years of research and writing to discover, and at each stage I need to have the ability to pull the ripcord and say, I'm not doing it. That fail-safe for me is very important, because when I'm building trust with real people over the course, whether it's Kerala in the jungle or in the asphalt jungle of Delhi, whatever it is over time, I'm building a trust, and at any point I make it clear to them, look, I'm not taking this and using it for this end or this end. I'm trying to figure out what you and your sector's requirement are. If I believe in your cause, how can I help you, essentially? And if the best way I can help you is my absence, I'll do that too, even if it's after a few years of R&D. So that's how it's happened. Having said that, we are not here unless an Amazon Prime steps up, right? So it's still part of that process. And at that point, if I'm finished the scripts and I have gotten the resources, at that point it just makes sense for me to carry on and finish it in the best way I can. I also love having a gun to my head. that if it's not the best version of itself, it will not sell. So everyone is motivated because there's that background thing in your head of if this doesn't sell, you're finished.
Yeah.
You better step up. So there's no complacency in the process. Like I said, we are also met halfway by a company like Prime.
I think that's something wonderfully, oddly sincere to say that apart from creative freedom of developing a show the way you want, having the option to back out if you feel like that's not what you should be doing is something quite sincere in that. The other thing that's very interesting with, you mentioned obviously freedom, I understand that, to have the time and space to develop and only sort of speak to a platform when it's ready. Is there also an element of the fact that it's still your show and it's owned by, I assume, the producers? The reason I ask that question is because we live in a very strange time where you have a lot of sort of shows getting dropped and things like that, and it's just a very uncertain time, I imagine, for somebody who's trying to make a show and find a home for it. So is that the other advantage, that it's still yours or it's still owned by your collaborators?
Yeah, so look, if you're talking about this whole thing of like Warner Brothers dropping projects, and which is a very scary time, that you finish a project and then all of a sudden it doesn't exist for eternity.
Which has a show, it has a following, you know.
Oh, I mean that's really a nightmare for me. And so one of the things I do creatively, I do have ideas to continue this series if we all decide we want to. If it doesn't, it's great. There's a finite ending to this too. So I can't afford to have that broken heart. Yeah. But having said that, certainly for me, going forward, if there's any chance that this never finds the light of day, I would hesitate to continue to want to do it. So again, I know in the case of Poacher, we've been very, very lucky with the producers I have, with QC, with Amazon team has been amazing. Like I've hit a 6 for this one. Really lucky with this team. But this idea of licensing versus commission, it is becoming a lot scarier if a decision, and if decisions made at the highest level to cancel your project or to bury it. Because the fact is also, even everyone here, it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Everyone working on the ground, it has nothing to do with us. I generally tend to pass a threshold on a project where, like a week or two into production on Poacher, I saw what everyone was giving to it in the jungle, and now I start fighting for them. They've raised the quality of performance, of camera, of everything they're doing, and now I have to make sure that they're supported to do the best they can do, and that means finding it a home, and that means taking it all the way through in post and giving my all for it to support the high level they've done. And if it gets buried, I look at that as a failure. Yeah. So I have to figure out ways to avoid that in the future.
I also heard that with Poacher, which was obviously acquired in the US, I heard that you had multiple sort of major American platforms sort of vying for it. Why did you feel like Amazon was the right home for it?
They just gave the best pitch, honestly. They showed so much enthusiasm for it. They understood it. They understood the language split and what it meant for me. Yeah. I don't speak Malayalam as a North Indian, but it was really important to me to do this in the language that the wildlife crime fighters essentially were speaking. And importantly, the language that local elephants understand. It was really important to me. And Amazon understood that. And when they came to me with their enthusiasm and their plan and what they wanted to do, and here we are, we're seeing it completely come to life, I was very moved by them. And you have a synergy with people when you speak to them about something, like we are having. And you kind of feel it through. And when I spoke to them for the first time, and I could see in their eyes and hear in their voice that we're going to go to war together now to get this out into the world, and I'll take a bullet for you because I think you're going to take a bullet for me. So and you're going to take a bullet in front of the elephant, really, which is what matters.
Just on that point, I think that's one of my favorite things about your storytelling, your sort of commitment to authenticity without ever losing sight of the humanity and the drama and the things that make us really engage with a story. The other thing that's interesting about both your shows is they didn't get acquired and find a home platform-wise here. These are Indian shows about India, with an Indian cast, etc. But you got them greenlit in the US. How come?
That's actually I can't actually speak to that because I don't know if that's necessarily entirely true. I mean, these decisions are made across countries now, right? So a show like Poacher, if the India team doesn't want it, it's not happening. Yeah. It's that simple. Yeah. They've got to own it, and that's what's happening here. So that's not just a decision that's made there or made here. Netflix was still kind of early stages in India at the time, so that's a different ballgame for Delhi crime. But no, it's actually, there's no, the right arm is not functioning without the left arm knowing what's going on. In this case, it's a, and obviously India is such a flagship market for Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
So it's not that another US is acquiring it and saying deal with it. It's, do you want it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Then the love for it comes from here.
I didn't mean sort of, it was sort of
No, I
imposed.
know.
It's just very
It's a
interesting.
clarification. Yeah. It is interesting. It's very complex.
Yeah.
How this works. Yeah.
And the other thing that's very interesting about the journey of both your shows is when somebody thinks of film festivals, they don't tend to think of series, despite the fact that some of the finest storytelling today is on series. Sundance was instrumental to both of your shows.
Yes.
You sort of premiered both shows there. Poacher had the first 3 episodes, and that's how they sort of found a platform. Why go through festivals? Is it because these were independently produced? Why go through that route?
Because there's so much noise in the marketplace, and first of all, we're like anyone else. You have to apply to these festivals. You can get in or not get in, right?
Yeah.
There's no, even for after Delhi Crime, there's no free entry. So I'm grateful that we got in on Poacher, and but then what it does is it differentiates the series. I think in the eyes of the distributors and buyers and platforms, that okay, this is not just a marooned project in the marketplace. The curators of Sundance have said there's something very special, so we should probably pay attention. That's where that help. That's where it really helps. And then it helps to test drive the project, the first 3 episodes in a cinematic setting to see how it feels.
I'm very jealous of those audiences. They get to watch on the big screen.
Yeah, they do, and it's really nice, and it's the full mix and everything we do, because we make these things cinematically, essentially. So that is the real, and then for me, it's a kind of gratification, of course. I'm a filmmaker. I love going to festivals, and it feeds me and feeds my soul, and then to have a discourse with other filmmakers and journalists there. And so my career has been birthed out of film festivals from day one, from Toronto to Venice and Sundance now and other places. So I'm a product of that. I volunteered. The first thing I ever did was volunteer at a film festival.
That was TIFF, right?
That was TIFF, yeah. So they have been instrumental. I met my life partner at a film festival. That's how that all works. So,
but so I guess the question essentially would be, if I am a writer or creator, I've written a show, I feel like this, I put my life and soul into this, I think it's very, very special. What advice would you have for me in terms of both trying to find producers who are willing to help me bring it to life without going through a platform until it's ready, it's the best version of itself, and B, also leveraging film festivals, because again, there isn't much of a precedent in terms of how I could use a film festival to really gather noise for my show. Mm-hmm. So what advice would you have?
You know what, it's really difficult, to be honest, because the fact is the market plays a big part of this. The market is a very intangible thing. You can't just say it's one person or one thing or one phenomenon. And right now the market is in a very strange place globally. Like you'll notice budgets are going down, and people are struggling here and to get the resources they need to do the shows they want, and obviously there are homes like this that are still doing it, but few and far between. So investment, independent investment for a series or a film is completely dependent on will the market buy it, and at what costs are they looking at, and are you going to be the exception if you break through that? So you have to find intrepid people who are willing to finance these things. And I was very lucky on Delhi Crime and on Poacher to find in separate groups, of course, intrepid financiers and very confident producers. And then the next phase of that is I'm researching and writing speculatively. There's nobody's involved in the first phase of my work except me. So when I go to them, I almost have very close to a finished script, fully researched, and then they can see the proposition. They can see what I'm going to do. They can see what it is, the content. There's no guessing. We minimize the guessing game. So that takes years of work to get to that spot on every project. And that requires you to figure out how to subsidize your life in that time. There's all these tricks that come into play. So honestly, it's not, there's no magic trick. It's labor. And the labor is very simple logic. And I stumbled on it in Delhi Crime because I pitched it everywhere and everyone said no at the script stage. And then I stumbled onto these producer financiers who were willing to take a risk. And at that point, I was at the verge of giving up and moving on to something else. And then it just worked out. And then that now started this pattern.
I do think there's a lot to learn from your journey getting these things made for people who may not want to go down the traditional route. Mm-hmm. It's just a very interesting journey. You mentioned the market and sort of how different it is. Poacher's coming into a very different streaming ecosystem than Delhi Crime did. It feels like a lot has changed over the last few years, both here and in the US. it just feels like a bleak time. There's this talk of sort of platforms sticking to what's safe, what's trusted. There's talks of budgets coming down, etc. So what do you feel has changed the most in that time in terms of the wider streaming ecosystem for a filmmaker?
I think it's look. The fact is, there's a lot of stuff out there. I can't keep up with the amount of series and films that are being put on streaming platforms. The U.S. strikes had an effect. Obviously, pandemic had a different effect, and so I think it is a very different world from when I did Deadly Crime, because when I started that project, streaming didn't even exist. 2013, it wasn't a thing. Yeah. And then by the time when we dropped that show, 2019, it was just starting to be a thing in this part of the world. Now it's beyond a thing. Yeah. It's a lifestyle. It's part of people's lives.
To which you have set the benchmark as well with Deadly Crime.
I mean, but again, I just developed that as a 7-hour film, and then it ended up being what it was, because it was not developed knowing what the market was going to be. Yeah. Poacher had a little bit more of that in mind, but I used the same rules, developed it as a massive series. There's no showrunner on it per se. I mean, technically, I'm just writing, directing, and executive producing with my producers on it. But I'm doing all the episodes, so that makes it easier to manage. So it's not managed like a normal series. But to be frank, I don't know what the ecosystem is currently, because I think it's changing so fast. Like, the ecosystem was different a month ago than I think what it is now. And every time I kind of pop my head out to see, it's like, oh my God, and I go back down and just carry on finishing the series. So I don't know what's going to happen. And this is also why I trust the team. I immensely trust the team I'm working with at Prime. But, and they're gearing it in the best way they can from a market standpoint. But at the end of the day, my feeling with streaming has always been and always will be, with series, is that it's not a first weekend thing or a first week thing. They find their way through word of mouth. Sometimes it takes a year or 2 or 3, and that's fine. Deadly Crime took a couple of years. All the biggest international shows we have, it wasn't that it just picked up 1 week. Yeah. It takes time. And that'll only work if the show is really, really, really well done and well made, which is all, that's as a filmmaker how it affects me. Again, it's that same gun to the head of, like, if it's not amazing, or at least the best version of itself that you can do and your team can do, it won't sell. And then beyond that, it won't even exist after.
Yeah. I guess as a filmmaker, the only takeaway you can take from that is not to ignore the wider sort of ecosystem. You obviously have to be aware of it. You have to be pragmatic in the story you're telling, but also just focus on making it the best it can be. I guess that's the only thing in your control.
And be aware of what people are watching in terms of content. Yeah. Like, I try to disassociate myself with market trends and look more at what is people are interested in terms of style. Has pacing increased over the last few years? Yes. So therefore, if I want to play that game, I don't mind increasing the pacing of what I'm doing, because I'm also a viewer. Yeah. I'm watching things that are paced higher now, even dramas. So my patience level has changed over time. That doesn't mean we can't have slow burn character development. It just means the pacing of how things unfold is slightly different. So I look at those kinds of things. And how to adapt to actually how we're perceiving storytelling. That is the most important thing.
The other thing that's very interesting with you, which you obviously just mentioned as well, is the fact that you write and direct, everything, your sort of entire show. There are many cases of creators and showrunners doing that the first time round, and then they realize they want to live and survive and sleep.
That's right.
And second time round, they will collaborate with other writers or other directors.
Yep.
Why did you choose to sort of keep it all in-house and do everything yourself again?
Because, so as I was learning about this real-life investigation that these wildlife crime fighters did, I was I was putting together the timeline of what things happened, what happened and when and how. And as I put it together, I could start to see episodes just writing themselves, really. Because there was like adventures and escapades in an episodic manner. Then this happened, and then there was a break, and then this happened, and there was a break. And it was really coming. And I just figured it was quicker for me to write it out. Then instruct somebody, here you go, and do this. And plus, I was loving it. And this was pandemic time. I was writing this in the pandemic, so I didn't want to be on extra Zooms. I was just happy, writing away. And then from the directing standpoint, I couldn't, there's all of, in Poacher, it all culminates into the last scene of episode 8. Everything that's happening all comes together in one moment. And I needed to see that through. I needed to make those threads happen and come together.
And it felt that it had to be you because you were so invested. I
was so invested in it. And again, it's the opposite of Deadly Crime in a way that everyone already knows about the crime in that series, and everyone has a very strong relationship to it. And I need to sensitively navigate that in the very beginning. And and it packs a punch in the first 3 episodes, and then it kind of starts to calm a bit, because the essence of that show is I'm going to bring you in on the negativity you understand and try and take you to a place of some conflicting hope in a way. With Poacher, it's quite different, where most people are not aware of this crime, so I have to show you right away, and then I've just got to keep you going till the end, because I am really trying to make a point here, and a point inspired by the real wildlife crime fighters in India. And
which, as you say, is an incredibly badass title.
Yes,
To be called a
it is.
wildlife-
Oh my God, it's the coolest job title,
Yeah.
wildlife crime fighter. And but I need you to stay till the end to really see what this is all about. And so, for example, the pacing of each episode increases as we go. Episode 1's the slowest episode, which is still, I think, quite a fast-paced episode, but it
Relatively.
just goes crazier as we go. And by 7 and 8, it's off the charts in terms of pacing. To get you to where I really, really want to take you. So my hope on this one is that we do have that the very low drop-off rate.
I have to ask you, drop-off rate and things like that. Again, as a filmmaker, how much does that stuff weigh on you? How much platforms have all these terms, which I understand, it's their world, but how much does that weigh on you when you're just a storyteller trying to tell a story?
I mean, look, the first film I ever made, a movie called Amal, which I shot in 2006, released in 7. And I remember the mark of a struggling independent filmmaker is when your film is pirated. And you're like, oh my God, really? It's worth it? It's worth being...
It's me in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I'm like, really? There's $1 DVDs in Chandni Chowk? So I was really happy. But then, so YouTube, when that came around, Amal was pirated onto YouTube in, I think it was 6 or 7 parts. 15 minutes each or something like that, or maybe 10 parts, I can't remember.
You were making shows before you realized it.
Somebody had somehow pirated just the pieces of it. And there was a drop-off rate. You could see the views of like how many thousands,
So
10,000s, and then into the single thousand, and then 100, and very few people made it to the end. And I'm like, this was, again, 2011 or something. I'm like, this is interesting. Is it just a attention span thing? I don't know what it is.
So has it been dwelling, have you been thinking about that from back then?
Look, Delhi Crime seems to have had a high binge rate. It just happened. I hope Poacher has a similar thing, because I really want people to experience it in one go. The only thing I pay attention to, honestly, if somebody comes to me at a platform and says you have a low drop-off rate, I'll be like, oh, I guess, I'll try and make it more interesting towards the back end next time.
Yeah.
But that's what I kind of kept that in mind here, that I need to ramp this up to get you to go all the way. So it's not that data affects how I do things. It's just, you just don't want people nodding off. Yeah. It'd be like your old uncle falling asleep halfway through your film, which probably happens to every filmmaker.
Yeah.
And then they kind of wake up and they're like, TK beta, right? But you just don't want that happening.
Because I imagine, again, it's a very strange, tricky time for filmmakers in a digital world to just figure out, okay, this is the metric. These are, how do I process this? I have to ask you a Delhi Crime question. I'm curious to know how involved you are with sort of the season 2 and season 3. Do you have any creative involvement at all? Or?
No. I've just because all of my attention has been on Poacher in every way, and I think that team has a handle on what they're doing and how they're doing it. And again, my real intention with Delhi Crime was to talk about one thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about that incident and all the swirling themes around it, and really talk about those amazing women that I had gotten to know, and really, one of the similarities with Poacher, again, is we're talking about a very, very dark subject for both projects. And within that darkness, I'm showing kind of people who are saying to themselves, I'm going to go through that darkness and sort this out for everyone. That's really what I'm going for. And so that's also why I'm latching onto true stories, which is not necessarily the direction that show had gone. So no, I'm not involved in that show.
But was it strange for you? Because I mean, you can tell every fiber of that show is always imagined as a sort of a fixed story. Was it strange for you when they decided to franchise it, or whatever the word is?
It was, definitely, because it wasn't necessarily my intention, nor was I prepared for the ideas around that. But that's not the same with Poacher. I've kind of look at this differently. There's a whole, and the reason for it is because I think cop shows are, here's a term, over-indexed that I hear in platforms.
Yeah.
There's just too many of them in the world. We know every aspect of cops and how they...
Here it's all gangsters. It's cops and gangsters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. we don't know anything about wildlife crime fighters.
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's a different world.
Very much
and
so.
crime is obviously a very enticing, dramatic device.
Yeah.
So to me, there's a whole subgenre that's now on the cusp of creation that I hope Poacher leads into. And I have so many ideas, I don't even know what to do with them. I could spend the rest of my life in this world.
That's I mean, wonderful to hear as an audience. I will ask you just two more questions. One of my favorite exercises to do as a journalist every year is just to list out all of the projects Richie Mehta's name comes up against. You know, things that have been announced that you wanted to see. So I'm just going to list them.
Some of them I can't talk about.
But no, I just want to know if these are going ahead. These are reality. Are these just in development? There was a project on the Bhopal gas tragedy that was announced. There was the Prince of Tea, which was a project based in China. There was a Priyanka Chopra-backed project that was rumored to be announced about the freedom struggle and the role of women within that. There was a film adaptation of a book called Cutting for Stone. There was another film adaptation of a book called Passage to India. I feel like there's more stuff, but can you tell us anything about any of those things?
Yes and no. How about this? None of those are untrue.
Okay. But I guess that comes with the territory of 10 things in the air and see what lands.
Yeah, in a way. Look, the way I also look at it is that when I come across a project, if I really, really feel something for it, whether it's somebody pitching me a project or I've encountered it myself, I'll take that through to wherever it takes me. Sometimes a project takes me halfway to a place and then I diverge from where that project is going and somebody else takes over for it. And sometimes it just leads me to something else. I was writing a script for a year and a half, which then eventually led me to meet the police commissioner, former police commissioner, which led me to Delhi crime. Yeah. And that project will never happen, the other one. It just took me to where I needed to get to.
I love the stories, the little nuggets of how stories find you. You know, Poacher found you from India in a Day, Delhi crime. Siddharth happened because you met someone.
Yeah, Rickshawala, who just 10-minute conversation, which really moved me. The Price of Tea you mentioned is a project in China I really want to do, which is an encounter I had there, which was really, I think, really fascinating and worth doing. So each one kind of finds its way. And I also look at, there's only so much one can do to will a project into existence. There is a lot a human being can do to make anything happen in this world, really. An individual has immense power, I think. However, with the film, you need so much money and so many resources and so many people behind you. There's only so much you can do before willing it into existence will take all of your energy. Yeah. And for that, to pass that threshold, I only have a few of those in my life. Poacher was one of them.
Where you'll do anything to get that.
Where I will help will that into existence. Yeah. And in this case, I didn't have to because I found producers and partners in LA with QC who helped me will it into existence. And then Amazon it was a handoff.
Enabled it.
Yeah, it's exactly. So that was a smooth process that way. But there are other projects that, even some of the ones that you've named that I've been attached to, that I don't have the energy to will those in existence if they pass a threshold, and some of them I do.
Yeah. I guess as a filmmaker, then, is the advice it must be tricky to find the balance between this is my baby, I'm putting my entire life into it, and also having other things going to back yourself up if something doesn't.
Yes, that's exactly it. That is the balance. And then if you want another aspect of your life, the personal life, that's a balance. That's the struggle every single day, including today for me. That is a struggle that will never, ever leave you. Depends on how seriously you take it, and also I think the reasons you're doing this. If you're doing this just as an art form because you need to exercise your own demons and you love messing around with the tools of filmmaking, great. You can spend all the time you want by yourself. But if you have aspirations to do other things in your life, then you're picking a fight, basically.
I guess that's the aim, right? Know which fights to pick. Just on a concluding note, I know you said that the ecosystem is something you don't spend too much time dwelling on because you're off working on stories. But if there's one thing you could change about the streaming ecosystem and how it functions, what would it be?
Ooh, I don't know if I can answer that right now because I haven't had a chance to really consider the streaming ecosystem too much.
Or just your perspective as a filmmaker, if there's something that you could change.
The thing is, I don't think that way. I never have. And the reason for it is, I try not to dwell too much on the machinery of the film industry. I don't dwell too much on it. I spend all of my time dwelling on how can this machinery
bent.
be used for the benefit of the world. So it's not a question of I wish I could change that. It's what is happening. It's just looking at what is it, and now how do I use it. I've always been that way.
It's a very healthy mindset to have. So there's nothing you feel that, in terms of just getting that thing off the ground, there's nothing that you feel that you
No, look. If let's say I'm talking to a streamer for a year on a project, or they've come in and all of a sudden they dump it in development, which can happen. I don't look at it as, oh my God, woe is me. Why did they dump this? I look at it as, I guess it wasn't right. It wasn't the right fit. I'm glad that
it happened now.
Yeah, I'm glad that we left before the altar.
Yeah.
You know, that we parted ways, because it is a union of so many people and so many mindsets, and I don't want to fight until a divorce.
Yeah.
I'd just rather be friends and leave, and then have well-wishers, and then for all I know, half the people there are going to end up at another streamer, and then they'll pick it up. I just watch and see what's happening.
Again, I think that's a very, very healthy, balanced mindset to have for any filmmaker not wanting to lose their mind. But Richie, thank you so much for doing this. I'm glad we could do this in person, and I really look forward to watching Poacher. As I said, it just seems like such a distinctive world, and your storytelling is always something that stays with you. So I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.